Tuna Pinwheels with cheese sauce. Cooking principles. Cooking principle number 1. Type of quick bread using the biscuit method. The biscuit method. Step 1. Sift dry ingredients together. Step 2. Cut in solid vat with a pastry blender. Step 3. Add enough liquid ingredients to the dry ingredients to form a soft but not sticky dough. Step 4. Knead the dough to develop the gluten and create the layers. Cooking principle number 2. The consistency of unbaked crust is a soft dough, 1 part liquid ingredients to 3 parts dry ingredients. Cooking principle number 3. Using flour in the cheese sauce as a thickener. Nutrition. Simple carbohydrates. There are 3 types of foods that give your body energy. Next to proteins and fats, carbohydrates are one of the main sources found in most diets. During digestion, sugars, starches are broken down into simple carbohydrates. They are absorbed into your bloodstream where they're known as blood sugar or blood glucose. There are simple carbohydrates and complex ones. Because of the use of refined white flour and sugar, we would classify this recipe as full of simple carbohydrates. Complex ones are usually found in high fiber foods and whole grains, such as whole wheat flour. Enriched flour has the 3 B vitamins, thiamine, niacin, and riboflavin, and iron added to it. Enriched grains have had the vitamins and minerals that were lost during storage, transportation, and processing added back in by the manufacturer. An example of an enriched grain is white flour. In Canada, white flour must be enriched with vitamins and iron, which means the manufacturer added those nutrients. However, enriched white flour is missing many of the nutrients and fiber that is found in a whole grain. B vitamins play a vital role in maintaining good health and well-being. As a building block of a healthy body, B vitamins have a direct impact on your energy levels, brain function, and cell metabolism. B vitamins also help prevent infections and promote good cell health. Iron is a mineral that your body uses to help make 2 proteins, hemoglobin and myoglobin. Hemoglobin helps your red blood cells move oxygen from your lungs to the rest of your body. Myoglobin brings the oxygen to your muscles. Iron is the most important in making hormones, as well as tendons, ligaments, and other connective tissue. Cheese sauce provides protein, calcium, and fat. Protein is a complex group of molecules that does all kinds of jobs in your body. They make up your hair, nails, bones, and muscles. Protein gives tissue and organ their shape and helps them work the way they should. In short, protein is one of the building blocks that make you who you are. Your body needs calcium to build and maintain strong bones and teeth. Your heart, muscles, and nerves also need calcium to function properly. Dietary fats are essential to give your body energy and to support cell growth. They also help protect your organs, help keep your body warm. Fat also helps your body absorb nutrients like fat-soluble vitamins and produce hormones too. Your body definitely needs fat. Ingredients. For the dough, you will need 250 milliliters of all-purpose flour, Gluten is the protein substance found within flour, which forms strong elastic strands when mixed and kneaded with a liquid. Heat from the oven will harden this protein, and our tuna pinwheels will be held in its risen state. 10 milliliters of baking powder. Baking powder is a leavening agent that, when combined with a liquid, will produce carbon dioxide gas, which will help leaven our tuna pinwheels. Few grains of salt. Salt enhances natural flavors found within any recipe. In our recipe, when a few grains is mentioned, we really mean a pinch, a dash, or such a tiny amount that it's too small to be measured. 30 milliliters of cold shortening. This solid fat acts as a tenderizer, for it interferes with the development of gluten, keeping our tuna pinwheels soft in texture. It will also melt, helping to create air pockets for steam to flow through, which will create our flaky layers, which is typical of any recipe using the biscuit method. 80 milliliters of milk. Milk is the liquid needed to help activate the baking powder in our recipe, which will make carbon dioxide gas and leaven our tuna pinwheels. For the filling, you will need half canned tuna fish. Tuna is a good source of essential nutrients such as omega-3 fatty acids, protein, selenium, and vitamin D. When shopping for canned tuna, it is important to look for sustainable tuna species from a healthy stock such as skipjack or albacore. Seafood can be very complicated, so it's also important that you know where it's coming from and also how it was caught. Make sure it was caught by using hook and line and not through casting nets. In Canada, you can also look for the ocean-wide seafood symbol, then you know you've made a sustainable choice. Today, I'm using a skipjack tuna that was caught in the Pacific Northwest using hook and line. 5 milliliters of oil. Our tuna was packed in water, and if we were to bake it in the oven now, it would only dry out further. Adding a little bit of extra oil will help maintain the moisture in our tuna fish. 15 milliliters of chopped onion. Onions will provide a great flavor and texture to our tuna pinwheels. Onions are known to have a great source of vitamin C, vitamin B6, and manganese. Onions also contain antioxidant properties known to help the stomach and gastrointestinal tract. 15 milliliters of chopped celery. This crunchy stalk adds flavor and texture to our tuna pinwheels. Celery contains vitamin C, beta-carotene, but there are also 12 additional kinds of antioxidants found within a single stalk. Mostly, there is a ton of fiber in celery, which can benefit your digestive and cardiovascular system. 15 milliliters of grated cheddar cheese. Cheese is the secondary flavor in our tuna pinwheel today. It will also help melt and bring together some of our filling ingredients. Cheese is a good source of protein and calcium. Calcium is a key nutrient for healthy bones and teeth, blood clotting and wound healing, and also maintaining good blood pressure. Half a large egg. Egg will not only contribute to the nutritional value of our recipe today, but it will help bring together and bind all of our filling ingredients so that they do not leak out of our tuna pinwheels. Few grains of celery salt. Celery salt is one of the seasonings we are using in our tuna pinwheel filling. It is actually a combination of both table salt and celery seeds ground together. Few grain salt. Salt is one of the seasonings used in the filling. We're hoping that it will enhance both the tuna and the cheddar cheese flavor in our tuna pinwheels. And lastly, few grains pepper. Adding pepper to help season our food will add a little bit of depth and some spice to our filling. Let's take a look at the cheese sauce ingredients. Please note, this is a unit recipe made by the entire group. 25 milliliters of margarine. Margarine will help add flavor to our cheese sauce, but it is also an important part in making a roux. A roux is a mixture of equal parts flour and fat that we use to help thicken our cheese sauce. 15 milliliters flour. Flour is the second ingredient used to create a roux, which is responsible for thickening our cheese sauce. Traditionally, all-purpose flour is used for a roux because it contains enough starch in the flour. Starch is important because it expands and gelatinizes while absorbing the liquid like a sponge. This is what creates the thickening action. 125 milliliters of milk. Milk adds extra nutrition to our cheese sauce by providing calcium and vitamin D. A white sauce is traditionally made from both a white roux and milk combined together. This is known also as a bechamel sauce. Bechamel sauce is one of the mother sauces in French cuisine. 1 milliliter salt. Salt enhances natural flavors found within the recipe, and our cheese sauce will help bring out the sharpness of the cheddar. 30 milliliters of grated cheddar cheese. Cheese is the main flavor for our sauce today. We're using a medium cheddar, which has been aged slightly longer than a mild one, has a little bit more flavor, but not as sharp or distinctive as a strong cheddar. This type of cheese is very good for melting. These are all the ingredients found within our tuna pinwheels and our cheese sauce. Equipment. For this recipe, you will need measuring equipment, dry measures, liquid measure, and small measures, metal spatula, custard cups, a metal spoon, a set of mixing bowls including the small and medium bowl, a sieve, a metal pie plate, cutting board, a chef's knife, a grater, can opener, a pastry blender, a metal fork, a rolling pin, a pastry mat, a bread knife, a cookie sheet, hot mat, oven mitts, a lifter, cooling rack, a double boiler, a wooden spoon, and a rubber spatula. Method. Step 1. Biscuit stands for the beginning steps that you need to do at the start of your lab. B stands for books and bags. They should be away either at the back of the classroom or under your table. A stands for apron, which you need to put on to help protect your clothing. S stands for sleeves. You need to roll them up past your elbows. H stands for long hair that touches the shoulders that needs to be tied back, or hats that need to be removed. C stands for chairs that should be tucked under your table and out of your way. H stands for hands that should be washed properly for 30 seconds using hot water and soap. E stands for equipment, which you should be getting out as quickly as possible without wasting time. And T stands for the towels that you need to pick up. You need at least 2 dishcloths and 2 tea towels. Step 2. Use oven racks 2 and 4. Preheat oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit or 200 degrees Celsius. A hot temperature is needed so biscuits can rise quickly and form layers. To set the temperature on your oven, start by pressing the bake button. Then, using the up and down arrows, select the temperature desired. Step 3. Finely chop onion and celery. Grate cheddar cheese. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put my vegetable pieces on a cutting board and I'm going to use a chef's knife. First, I'm going to cut my celery into long strips that are about 1/2 centimeter wide. These are known as bâtons, or in French, bâtonnets. Bâtonnet is French for little stick. This is the starting point for a small dice. Getting this part done properly will ensure success later. Next, we'll turn our celery sticks so that we can cut crosswise along the length. We're going to go about 1/2 centimeter by 1/2 centimeter square. Notice how I'm cautious to move my hand backwards along the celery sticks. You want to keep your hands and fingers in a tight C shape away from the blade. That is a proper small dice. Next, we're going to dice the onion. Now, onions often have a skin on the outside that you should peel off. Another thing you're going to notice is that I tend to leave the root of the onion in place. This will help keep the layers all together as I chop the onion. The number one question I get from my students is how do we stop from crying when cutting onions? There's a couple different ways we can do this. First, by putting them into the fridge for 2 hours before cutting, or into the freezer for about 30 minutes before cutting. And lastly, you can wear goggles to seal the area around your eyes so that the chemical does not hit them, causing you to tear up. This chemical is known as syn-propanethyl S-oxide. Much like the celery, I first take my section of onion and cut lengthwise slits into all the layers. The root really does help keep it all together. Then, turning the onion onto its side, I do my rock and chop motion, carefully moving along the lengthwise strips. The dice shape is exactly 1/2 centimeter by 1/2 centimeter square, the same size as our celery. I'm then going to temporarily transfer the onion and celery to a small plate and put them off to the side while I use the cutting board to help grate our cheese. I use the grater on top of a cutting board so I have a non-slip surface. That way I don't accidentally slip and cut the tips of my fingers. As I grate the cheese, you're going to notice I constantly rotate the block. That way I'm not developing a sharp angle. Sometimes that will lead more to accidents than slipping. I'm using a block of marbled cheddar I have in the fridge. You might notice that our Canadian cheese is dyed orange. Around the world this isn't the case. Cheddar is often dyed orange using natural pigments from either annatto seeds, the spice saffron, marigold flowers, or carrot juice. Many cheese producers even like to use the dye, yellow number 5. In the old days, a cheese with a slight orange pigment meant the cow had a good grass-fed diet rich in beta-carotene. It was more expensive and more desired. Nowadays, it's used to help consumers at the grocery store quickly tell the difference between cheddar and other varieties such as mozzarella. When I come down to the end, I'm going to use the flat hand to push the cheese through the grater. I'm going to do this very slowly, that way avoiding any sharp edges and cuts. Make sure you get any of the loose pieces from the inside of the grater as well. This will ensure that your dishwasher doesn't have a harder cleanup. Step 4. Combine tuna, oil, chopped onion and celery, grated cheddar cheese, celery salt, egg, salt, and pepper in a small bowl. When using a can opener to open the can of tuna, be gentle about the sharp edges on the sides. Make sure you drain all the water from the tuna so that it is dry as possible, and remember to share half the can with the other partner group in your unit. You need half an egg, and the other half is to be shared with the other partner group in your unit. Start by cracking the egg on the surface of the counter and breaking it into a custard cup. Use a metal fork to stir up the egg white and egg yolk so it's blended together. An egg is roughly 70 milliliters, so measure out 30 to 35 milliliters and split the egg between the two pairs. In a small bowl, let's combine all of our filling ingredients. Starting off with half a can of tuna. Tuna is a lovely protein for this as it's inexpensive and readily available in all stores. Now we're going to measure the oil. We're going to do this off to the side. In case we spill, we don't want to have extra land into the bowl. The oil will help keep the moisture in our fish as it bakes in the oven so it doesn't dry out. Then we'll add our diced onion and celery. We're using it for texture within our filling so it has a lovely crunch factor in the end. I'll measure some of the cheddar cheese for the filling as well, and the rest we'll use in the cheese sauce. I'll season my filling mixture using celery salt, salt, and pepper. It's a few grains of everything, so that really means a pinch or dash. It's too small to be measured by our 1 milliliter. Small measure. Lastly, I add in the half egg, making sure I share the other half with the partner. This egg will help glue all our ingredients together and create a nice solid mixture so that it doesn't leak outside our pinwheels. Stir the filling mixture up with a metal fork, making sure it's evenly combined, and put to the side while we work on our dough. Step 6. Sift flour, measure, and sift again into a medium bowl. Lightly stir in the baking powder and salt. Sifting adds in air and gets rid of lumps, and this is the first step of the biscuit method. You can buy pre-sifted flour in the grocery store, but because of our moist climate on the west coast of Canada, our flour tends to lump up anyways, even if it's stored in an airtight container. Using a metal spoon, I gently scoop up my flour to re-measure and level off with the metal spatula. Be gentle, we don't deflate all that wonderful air. Save the sifted flour to help roll out your dough. Now I'm going to sift my flour one more time and add in all the other dry ingredients to my dough. I sift these as well to make sure that they are lump-free and to help evenly distribute the baking powder throughout the whole entire dry mixture. Step 6. Measure solid fat, cold shortening, by using the water displacement method. Start by putting 100 milliliters of cold water into a liquid measure. Make sure the water is cold so we do not melt our fat. Then, place the liquid measure on a flat surface, get down at eye level, and slowly use 2 spoons to push cold shortening underneath the water line. The water line will raise to 130 milliliters. After that, drain the water and you have accurately measured 30 mils of cold shortening. Step 7. With a pastry blender, or 2 knives, cut fat into dry ingredients to the size of small peas. Course meal. Second step of the biscuit method. Knead fat to form layers. The solid fat will melt between the flour layers and leave spaces between the layers. The act of adding fat to the dry ingredients in a biscuit method is known as cutting in. I'm using a pastry blender to help cut the fat down to the size of small peas. When the fat gets stuck in the wires of my pastry blender, I use a metal spatula to help push it through. I keep going until I see the fat is well blended within the dry ingredients. If you do not own a pastry blender, you can do this another way by using 2 dinner knives. Take the dinner knives, 1 in each hand, and use a crisscross motion like this. It is a little slower, but it works all the same. Step 8. Gradually add milk to the dry ingredients while tossing with a fork. Add enough liquid until the mixture clings together to form a soft dough. Some of the milk might not be used. Do not overmix because gluten will become tough and heavy, and the product will have poor volume and poor color. Fork is used to prevent overmixing. This is the third step of the biscuit method. When I add the milk to the dry ingredients, I go very gradually, little bit at a time. I make sure I only add to the dry spots in the bowl. As I mix lightly and quickly with the fork, my dough starts to ball together and come away from the sides of the bowl. When it is in large pieces, I know it's ready to be kneaded and mixed together on a pastry mat. Step 9. Knead dough gently about 8 times on a clean, lightly floured surface. To knead, fold the dough in half, push down with the palms of your hands, and make a quarter turn. Repeat 7 times. Kneading will mix the ingredients together, develop the gluten, and add air. This is the 4th step of the biscuit method. I start by lightly flouring our pastry mat with some of the pre-sifted flour that I saved from earlier. I then dump the contents of my dough onto the mat. You will notice it's not yet a ball, but as I slowly start to knead, the mixture will come together and be its final mixing. This is an important thing to notice. Often, students add way too much water in the bowl, and when they start to knead, the dough is sticky. If you find your dough is sticky, you can add slowly 5 milliliters of flour to the dough as you knead. To knead the dough, I start by folding it in half, pushing down with the palms of my hands, and making a quarter turn. I keep repeating this until the dough has started to form together in a larger ball. I know I am done kneading when I touch the dough lightly with my finger and a little bit of it springs back. That means the gluten has been developed enough for our biscuit dough. Step 10. Roll dough into a 20 cm by 20 cm or 8 inch by 8 inch square. For groups of 3, a 20 cm by 30 cm or 8 inch by 12 inch rectangle. I start by looking at the pastry mat. It has a convenient grid for us to help measure our dough. When I roll the dough, I start always in the middle and push outwards. When you want a square, you need to keep your dough in a square. So as I roll, I will pause and again adjust the sides of my dough, keeping that square shape. Keep rolling until we get to the desired measurements. If the dough becomes sticky as you work or sticking to your rolling pin, add more of that pre-sifted flour that we saved from earlier. Make sure you keep that dough in that square shape, and when you're done, double check with the measurements on the pastry mat. That measurement is very important. It means your dough has not been rolled out too thin, causing it to burn, or too thick, causing it to be undercooked in the end. Step 11. Spread filling over dough and roll tightly, jelly roll style, into a log. An important thing to keep in mind when you put the filling down on the dough is that you need to leave one of the edges of the squares uncovered. You need to do this so that when you're done rolling up your tuna pinwheel, you can pinch together the dough and seal it shut. The filling is a very moist liquid mixture. Sometimes when rolling up the dough, it might crack. Just gently pinch the dough back together, sealing the hole shut. If you don't, the tuna pinwheel will unravel in the oven. Step 12. Cut into 3 cm pieces. Place on an uncreased cookie sheet, evenly spaced apart. Use a cookie sheet and not a jelly roll pan, needed for even heat circulation. Using a bread knife with a serrated edge and a cutting board, we will slowly gently trim off the ends of our tuna pinwheel. The ends usually don't have as much filling and they're usually more dough. Discard the ends into the compost bin. Then, using the same bread knife, cut the log in half. Make sure you're using a sawing motion to help preserve our round shape of our pinwheel. Once you have the log cut in half, use the bread knife to divide each half into 3. Make sure the pinwheel's thicknesses are even. Even will ensure an equal bake on all the pinwheels. Do not cut on the pastry mat. The pastry mat is not a cutting board and you will slice right through it. Make sure you use the cutting board. When transferring the pinwheels onto the cookie sheet, make sure you put them spiral side up. Gently move them around so that they're evenly spaced apart. If you need to, gently reshape the pinwheel so it is a round, even shape that is uniform with all the others. They should be equal in size and shape. Step 13. Bake for 15 to 20 minutes or until lightly golden brown. Remember to stagger cookie sheets, one on the top right and the other on the bottom left. Switch halfway through the baking time. When you are setting the timer on your oven, first hit the timer on-off button, then using the up and down arrows, select the desired time you need. Use a hot mat to help protect the countertop from the hot cookie sheet. Then make sure you use oven mitts to pull the pan from the oven. Make sure we remove the tuna pinwheels as fast as we can to a cooling rack using a lifter. If the cheese leaked out the bottom a little bit, it may stick to the cookie sheet. Just try your best to get the lifter underneath the bottom. We want to transfer them to the cooling rack as fast as possible or they will continue to bake on the cookie sheet. When this happens, often we'll have burnt bottoms on the tuna pinwheel and they won't meet our standards. The yield for this recipe is 6 pinwheels. 9 pinwheels if you're a group of 3. Next, let's make our cheese sauce. Step 1. Fill bottom of the double boiler half full with hot water. Cover and bring to a boil. We want to use a double boiler because cheese and milk often burn and scorch very easily on the stovetop. A double boiler will help steam the bottom of the pot and make sure that this doesn't happen. Step 2. Melt margarine in the top of the double boiler. Stir in flour to make a roux. The starch in the flour acts as a thickener. It will absorb the hot liquid and expand. Use the water displacement method to measure your margarine. Make sure your water is cold and fill it up to 100 ml in the liquid measure. Place on a flat surface and gently push the margarine down below the water line until it reaches 125 milliliters. Then remember to pour the water off the margarine so that we can use it in our mixture. We are going to make a roux. A roux is a classic French technique which is equal parts fat to flour. In our recipe today, we are not quite that ratio, as we are adding cheese to our white sauce. The cheese also acts as a thickener, so therefore our flour measurement is slightly less than equal to our fat. Gently melt the fat, in this case margarine, in the top of the double boiler pot until it's fully in a liquid form. Then, sprinkle carefully in the flour, constantly stirring so that we prevent lumps from forming. As the flour is put into the fat gently coats each of the starch granules, getting them ready to expand and absorb the liquid. Step 3. Gradually add milk, add salt, stir constantly until the mixture has thickened. The roux paste should be cooked on the heat long enough to help remove that raw flour taste, but not long enough that it will brown. This is a white roux in cooking terms. Now we're going to thicken it up using milk for a classic bechamel sauce. Slowly add the milk and stir constantly. As you do, the flour or starch will slowly absorb the liquid, thickening and thickening and thickening. Once the milk has all been added, double check that the bottom of the double boiler is still boiling. Make sure you cook the sauce over the heat until it starts to just thicken. Make sure you stir constantly. We do not want to have lumps. Lumps are very difficult to get rid of and will float on the top of our sauce, essentially ruining it, giving it a curdled-like appearance. Step 4. Grate and measure cheddar cheese. Stir in cheese and cook until it's melted, or cheese will become tough and stringy. Slowly add the cheese and stir constantly. You don't want to dump it all in at once, for it will stick together because of the high protein content of the cheese. Make sure after each addition you stir constantly. We want to make sure our sauce stays nice and smooth. We want to keep stirring until the cheese is well melted, and you'll start to notice the sauce coats the wooden spoon. We want to remove it from the heat before it gets too thick because it will continue to cook in the pot as it cools down. Step 5. Serve tuna pinwheels with cheese sauce. Plate your tuna pinwheels and pour on the sauce. Make sure you have a nice ratio of sauce to pinwheel. Tests for doneness. For the tuna pinwheel, 1. Double in height. 2. A light golden brown. For the cheese sauce, 1. Run slowly off a wooden spoon. Standards. 1. Symmetrical in shape. All 6 pinwheels are roughly the same size. 2. Pale color with golden brown bottom and edges. Biscuit dough is quite pale even when it's baked up. Until you flip it over, then you usually see a golden brown bottom. 3. Double in height. The tuna pinwheel will rapidly form layers when subjected to the hot oven, making it look double in size. 4. Flaky texture. Flaky texture is only achieved if the fat was cut into the dry ingredients to be small and pea-shaped before baking. 5. Crispy outside and tender inside. A classic biscuit dough has a hard exterior but soft, fluffy layers on the inside that melt in your mouth. For the cheese sauce, 1. Smooth, no lumps. Mixture was constantly stirred when the milk was added to the flour fat mixture known as a roux. 2. Thick but spoonable. Milk was added gradually, giving the flour starch enough time to slowly absorb the liquid as it was being added to the sauce. 3. Not curdled. Curdled equals tough and stringy from the fat and the cheese separating from the solid. This means that you gradually added the cheese, keeping it at a low temperature so it had a chance to melt, rather than at a high temperature, giving it a chance to separate. These are the standards of a good quality tuna pinwheel and cheese sauce. Let's take a look at my demonstration tuna pinwheels. We're going to look at 2 different ones. One that meets all of our standards and one that doesn't. First, we have a perfectly symmetrical round tuna pinwheel. It was tightly rolled, creating a lovely spiral shape. It is double in height, and you can see that the dough has doubled in width as well. Here we have a broken tuna pinwheel. It wasn't pinched together well while rolling, so it burst open in the oven. But you can see both tuna pinwheels have a lovely pale color, but they're golden brown on the bottom, which meets our standards. Biscuit dough can be quite versatile. Instead of making a sweet, we made a savory. This tuna pinwheel packs a punch in protein and other nutrients. I hope you had fun making it. Happy baking, and thanks for watching.